Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose. Thank you so much for making us the #1 health podcast in the world. I'm so grateful that we dive in every week to topics around wellness, around mental health, around vulnerability, empathy, finding our true, authentic, and sincerest selves. And I'm so grateful that you get involved in the conversation. I love seeing your posts on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and I love seeing what you're taking away. And I truly believe already, because I've just been speaking to today's guest outside the room before we dove in here and just now. And I think you're going to get so much from this conversation. So get your notepads out right now. If you are walking your dog, if you're cooking and you can't take notes, take mental notes. And if you can't take mental notes, then come back to this episode. I'm so excited for this conversation. Today's guest is Kate Bosworth. She's an actress, activist, and producer. And she's transitioned from being a young Hollywood star to one of today's leading people on screen and behind the lens. And by the way, she made her on-screen debut at 14 years old with zero prior experience. And we'll get to that in a moment. Her film credits include everything from Still Alice, Heist, 90 Minutes in Heaven, Homefront, Blue Crush, and so many more. And Kate and her husband, Michael Polish, have co-produced the feature film Nona. I highly recommend checking it out. And most recently, Kate now stars in and produced the Netflix sci-fi series, The Island, streaming on Netflix now. And we'll talk about that today. Kate, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. And we started talking, I think it was maybe a couple of months ago on Instagram through DMs. And this is why I love Instagram, because it introduces me to incredible people like you. And we started sharing these messages back and forth. Yeah. And I was so drawn to your openness, your vulnerability, your expression of the journey you're on. And I wanted to share that with my audience. Aww. And you've been so kind to trust me with that too. So I just want to say thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much for having me. I felt the same way. My husband is the one who introduced me to you.
Oh, no way.
He sent me a post that you had put up, and he was like, "You're really gonna like Jay Shetty." And then I started really stalking you, and I was like, "You're right." But yeah, I mean, that's why I love Instagram, social media too, is that you can kind of create bonds, through likeness, which is really great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Oh no, thank you. I'm so touched, genuinely, honestly. And the short conversation we just had outside, and the conversation we were having yesterday, I just think that you being confident, courageous, wonderful enough to share this revelatory moment in your life where you're going through deep reflection, for you to share at this time, I think is so brave and courageous. Yeah. And I think it's so beautiful. And I think it's going to help so many people, because we were just talking about it outside, that I think we're used to hearing things in hindsight. We're used to hearing about something once it's done and someone's had time to reflect, but you're actually going to be sharing what's happening with you right now while you're reflecting and learning. Yeah.
I mean, it was very, it was perfect timing really when you reached out to me. And I said to you, you know what, it's funny that you're asking me to come on now, because about a month ago, I literally just hit a moment of just such complete exhaustion. And I don't mean exhaustion like I'm tired and I need to sleep for a week. It was exhaustion just like spiritually, mentally, with kind of how I was approaching my career, how I was approaching family, love, sort of everything. And I just thought to myself, if I don't really consider this and kind of unplug from all of it, and unplug really just from the way I've been approaching things thus far in my life, I'm gonna find myself in some trouble, Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like when you can almost like see the road signs to an accident, and you're like, it's coming. I can see it's coming, and I'm like, I don't want to be in such a wreck that I have to be putting like body parts back together at that point, And so I literally just, I use this kind of metaphor. I feel like I was sort of standing on the edge of, of a cliff, and I just decided to kind of jump off and free fall without a parachute. I sort of did a bit of a clearing with, people in my life that I felt, weren't contributing in a way that I was contributing back. And so there was that kind of feeling of I'm in love, by the way, like not like in any kind of anger or any kind of, bad feelings for them. It was just, it's time to let that go and make space for other things. And really the big thing for me was to get in touch with the vulnerability. And that's scary. It's a crazy thing. And I have to live in so much vulnerability on a day-to-day basis with what I do for a living, and, kind of losing yourself in characters who are in a lot of pain or, are expressing certain things about themselves. You have to find a commonality of pain with characters. But the real deep kind of soul searching vulnerability of self, like going way back to how you were cooked by 36 years old, which is how old I am. Yeah. And feeling, for me, the big thing was, as I was telling you, I'm definitely A-type. In school, in high school, I was like very nerdy, very academic. I'm an only child, so I have two wonderful parents, and in raising me, they did raise me with high expectations. They did raise me with, we expect you to work hard and do the best you possibly can, and look in the mirror and say, did you do the best today? Which has so much benefit to it. On the other hand, it's a tall order, to have for yourself every single day. There's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. And so with that said, I've never been the kind of person that's phenomenally comfortable with the unknown. Like, I like to control, I like structure. Sure. I like to control things. Producing. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So in that sense, it works really well. To be a producer, those are the sides to me that work very well for that. But as a human being, and for someone who really felt like that was hindering me more than it was helping me, in my heart and in my soul, I just thought I have to kind of jump off this cliff and be comfortable with the discomfort.
Absolutely.
And that was crazy. Like, I literally had a month of not doing much and, making certain decisions in my life that were big decisions that really did kind of reveal a big unknown. And there was like 2 days where I felt like paralytic fear, truly, like where I was just sitting in one spot, just being like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this day. It was really that kind of overwhelming feeling. And then what was so great was that I sort of survived and thought, well, now the free fall is actually going from so much fear to excitement.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yes. It went from, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, to like, whoa, this is actually really cool. I like the unknown, or I feel amazing. Somewhat more comfortable in the unknown. And starting to approach life with a more sort of like observational point of view, rather than a controlling, sort of forceful point of view.
Okay, I've got so many questions now. I'm like, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I think anyone who's listening right now, I want you to put yourself back into a place when you felt how Kate's beautifully describing how she's felt. Or I'm thinking for a lot of you listening right now, you might even be in one of those situations right now. So I really want you to bring your whole body and your mind and your soul into this conversation, because I think just the way you articulated that was beautiful, by the way. And I'm hoping that that's going to help people navigate theirs. So one of my first questions is around, how were you approaching, you said A-type. Tell me about how you were approaching life. And you spoke a bit about it there, about your parents' expectations. When did that mindset of looking in the mirror every day and asking yourself if you've done the best, when was that useful? And when did you start to notice it wasn't useful? Because I'm guessing there are times when it's amazing, like you mentioned, and there's times when you're like, oh, okay, now I'm noticing this is not serving me anymore.
Totally. And honestly, I'm still in it, like, and I love how you said, that we're having this discussion, like, while I'm going through this moment of self-reflection. So I will sort of admittedly say I don't have actually all the answers. However, I will say that it serves me in being very diligent and determined and strong-willed with my work. I definitely am someone who will leave no stone unturned in terms of how can I make something happen? If my relationship, my marriage is struggling, how do we look at that? How do we, come together, or do we need separate, do we need some space? Like, what is it that will help us, be closer, and marriage isn't, I'm excited to talk to you about this too, because we've been married for 6 years, together for 8. And it's a really beautiful journey, and I think that's something that I had to really understand, that it really is that, there are peaks and valleys. There are really difficult moments, especially for us, we're 2 artists. So, we it's a little crazy sometimes. But the determination and the strong will and the the sort of A-type part of myself serves in that way. What I started to realize wasn't serving me was this kind of unrelenting self-criticism, ultimately, which then for me led to feelings of sort of shame, self-pity, and these are the things that I've been observing myself, right? And shame's an interesting one because shame takes a lot of vulnerability to admit that you have shame or humiliation over something. It's a lot easier to be angry.
Yeah,
right.
So true. Wow, really good point. Yeah.
And that's what I started finding myself, that I get really angry or frustrated with situations. And in this kind of real moment of saying enough of the things that aren't working for you, like, let's really strip this back. Like, let's see, how do you truly feel? And when I really got to the core of myself, I thought, well, there's, the self-criticism brings a lot of shame for certain things, shame that I am not succeeding in a certain way, or things that I feel like I'm failing, or that I'm not good enough, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And I thought, well, that is something that, you want to look at with vulnerability in a way that can then lead to more confidence, like
giving yourself the permission to look at it with vulnerability, without the judgment, without the criticism. Exactly.
And anger is interesting because it can feel a lot more comfortable at times.
Totally.
It's
100%.
It's a more comfortable, sort of thing to put on, to assume than, wow, I actually feel like really, I'm struggling right now, and that's sort of the place that I'm trying to get to, which is feel confident enough to feel vulnerable and to be able to feel calm with that vulnerability rather than sort of very erratic and chaotic, which, it's that thing where I would feel vulnerable and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to feel this way.
Yeah.
It's like that nerve of your heart, right? Where you're like, God, I'm hitting it. And it's like that, almost like electric jolt. And so this kind of time has been to say, okay, wow, yeah, that's the core.
Yes.
That's the core. So let's lean into that. Like, let's embrace that. Like, and even if it feels a little uncomfortable, that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. Like that's going to lead you somewhere else.
Caseta by Lutron offers smart lighting control, brought to you by pioneers in smart home technology. Caseta's smart dimmers and switches replace the switch in your wall, making all of the lights that switch controls act smart. Now, there's so many places in your home where a switch controls more than one bulb. The ceiling, lights, chandeliers, there's so many places. You can save money by replacing the switches instead of replacing all those bulbs. Smart bulbs give you the ability to control your lights with an app or voice assistant. Caseta gives you the best of both worlds. Smart lighting control from an app or your voice, which is awesome, and control at the switch that anyone can use. My favorite feature is the Smart Away feature, which randomly turns lights on and off during the evening to look like you're home even when you're not. So it's amazing for privacy. So get smart lighting the smart way with Caseta by Lutron smart switches. Learn more about Caseta at lutron.com/purpose. Again, that's lutron.com/purpose. Go be smart. I absolutely love anything that helps me feel better and is made up of quality ingredients. That's why it's so easy for me to tell you about Four Sigmatic. They specialize in mushroom-based drinks that benefit our immunity, our energy, and longevity, and help us live healthier. They have something for everyone, including mushroom coffee, mushroom elixirs, hot cacaos, and matcha and superfood blends. These products help awaken your mind and support your well-being without any compromising. I love that it's quick, just tear the packet and mix with hot water. This makes it great for travel and also when I'm in a rush. My personal go-to is the coffee with lion's mane. Lion's mane mushrooms have been used by the Buddhist monks to help with focus during meditation, and focus is something we all need in today's digital age. It's half the caffeine and double the mental clarity. I was worried about the taste since it's mushrooms, but it tastes just like coffee. Personally, mushroom coffee is way easier on my digestive system and doesn't leave me feeling jittery, nor do I crash 2 hours later. I suggest you take a chance of replacing 1 cup of your regular coffee with theirs, and it won't be long till you figure out it really works for you. I have a special offer just for you right now. You can receive a 15% off your purchase from Four Sigmatic. Just go to foursigmatic.com/purpose or use the discount code PURPOSE at checkout. That's foursigmatic, foursigmatic.com/purpose. Yeah, wow, so true. I love what you just said there about being confident enough to be vulnerable. Because usually we see it the other way around, right? Usually we see it as, oh, if I'm not vulnerable, then I'm confident.
Right. Exactly. And I think there, there is this kind of misconception that, vulnerability can feel like a weakness.
Weakness, yes.
And yet I really feel like for the first time in my life, I've been able to say to people, I actually don't have the answer for that.
Yeah.
And feel okay with that rather than
that.
say, I don't have the answer, but I'll find it and I'll get it right back to you. Like that's kind of how I used to be.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I have the impulse to kind of go back there because it's so much of, how I'm made up. But what I'm trying to really feel more comfortable in is saying I'm actually in a place of the unknown, and that's just where I'm at.
Just being okay with that. Yeah,
it's I think and what's exciting to me about the free fall rather than the fear is that to me that's really where so much growth comes in.
Yes. And sometimes it takes a bit of time to get there. I was saying to someone the other day that taking the analogy of sometimes like if your house is burning down right now, you don't have time to reflect and get intimate with it and figure out. You need to just run away, right? Like there's sometimes you're just like, forget that cliff. I just need to cry and hide for a moment.
Yes, totally.
Or I just need to run away from this situation. But then after the dust is settled, you come back and you go, well, what started that fire? Where did it come from?
Right.
Why did I have to run away from it? Right. Why did it happen in the first place? Right. It's like, then you can come back to it.
Yeah. And I think part of the process with that is to be, like sort of lovingly discerning with who you speak to and who you invite into that process. So I totally understand that feeling. Like the first, week was like the fire and the flames and just being, just being like, oh, I don't know what's happening. It's crazy. And then as the dust settled, it was about reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'm going through something that's really difficult and I'm struggling and can you come over? And, I feel like I've always prided myself on being the strong one and that people kind of come to me for answers for. And I found that, I was using the sort of metaphor to you outside, which was, Kate's got it. I've got it. And then all of a sudden like, I'm dropping. I don't have it. Who else can and that was sort of how I felt, where it's like just to let everything fall was kind of brilliant because I was like, well, I'm actually a lot clearer now because I see everything sort of like just, in a heap and it's actually okay.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of start to put things back in a way that is healthier and will have a more formidable longevity, I think, with self,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I love that metaphor because I think sometimes we're carrying things for so long and for so close that it's so close we don't even know what we're carrying anymore.
Right.
But you're carrying it and you feel the weight. But then when you actually drop it all, you can then go, oh yeah, I actually want to keep that. And that's not relevant. I'm getting that from you. Like that's the process of it.
Yeah.
One thing you said, which I thought was amazing, is you talked about how, and twice now you've sidelined anger in the sense of you've just been like, I'm doing this without anger.
Yeah.
And you talked about letting go of people with love.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really beautiful because I think, and sometimes I post about things like this and people struggle and they're just like, Jay, how can I, like if I stop talking to someone, then they're going to not like me or that can't be loving. Like, but how did you let go of people with love? Like how does that process work? Or
I think, for me, I was able to really look, in a broader sense of how I was feeling with two kind of pillars, which was fear and love. And so, to me, they were, all the fearful things were, in my case, was fear of the unknown, which is a big one, fear of losing what you have and fear of not getting what you want. And then you look at love and it's completely the opposite of that. And so I thought if I can really analytically understand fear, right? And to think, can I identify this relationship or this feeling or this experience with one of these three things, then I can kind of understand it and not feel so free floating with the feeling. Because fear is so mercurial. It can literally, when I say paralytic, it really did. It sort of became like this kind of crazy like straitjacket for me, for a couple of days. And then when I was able to say, well, why do you feel that way? Well, I'm really, really afraid of losing what I have.
If you're one of the 120 million people who suffer from lack of sleep, you love learning more about Pronto Sleep, the all-natural vapor inhaler from Australia that helps you fall asleep and, most importantly, stay asleep. Sadly, so many people don't enjoy going to bed because it's a struggle for them to actually fall asleep. And that's why Australian scientists invented Pronto Sleep. Pronto Sleep gently opens your nose to focus breathing, then delivers a soothing blend of pure essential oils known by traditional healers to relax and settle your nerves, so you fall into a beautiful sleep naturally. All the benefits of aromatherapy right under your nose. I love that it's small, discreet, comfortable, and easy to use. Pronto delivers a gentle blend of lavender, eucalyptus, valerian, and tea tree oil directly to your nasal passages and lasts up to 8 hours, and it works. In trials, 84% with trouble sleeping found that Pronto Sleep helped them fall asleep faster, and 74% reported that Pronto Sleep helped them stay asleep. So get the sleep of your dreams with Pronto Sleep, now available at select Walgreens, Amazon, or prontosleep.com. Pronto, the gift of sleep from Australia.
So let's look at that. So if why are you afraid of that? Well, because then I won't have this, and that's really important to me. Okay. Why do you need to change that? And so I really started to have this like dialogue with myself.
Yes.
And I would say, well, because I don't like where it's at because it's not serving me in this way. And I feel like I've not participated in the best way. Okay. So then you need to communicate.
Yes.
Communication, I know we hear this a lot, but really what I found was that, and long-winded answer to your question.
It's great.
Really the way of letting go with love to me is through communication in a way that is loving. And it's to be able to say through vulnerability, hey, I have to be really honest with you. And this is difficult for me to say. And it actually, to be honest, it actually creates a lot of vulnerability with me. With that said, to me, that was, it just created such incredible
So it's easier
change.
to be honest.
Yes.
Right? It's so much easier.
And I
in one
think,
sense.
it's interesting because we talked about this a little bit. I didn't grow up with Instagram or Facebook or any kind of global perception of what other people think or what I think of other people or what other people think of other people. This like what you said so wonderfully in your post. But, it's definitely, to me, like part of that, I think, was really feeling like I needed to unplug from that and get very, very genuine with myself.
Yes.
And the moment that I was able to say, this is truly how I feel, it allowed me to let go of the fear because it was just me. And that's kind of, there's nothing really left to hide behind.
It's not unknown now. Once you've given it a name, you've verbalized it, you vocalized it, it's not unknown anymore.
No, exactly. And I think, when we live in a world of perception, it is difficult to, I think for certain people, I think for a lot of people to feel honest and authentic and vulnerable. And that's, it's an interesting observation and reality of where we are right now as a society, which is everything's fine, everything's great, white picket fences, Labradors, like everything, and I'm guilty of it. I totally, which is why I was so excited to come here and speak with you in a way that I feel safe, because I think we will really thrive more as a society and in our relationships and in our friendships with more vulnerability and honesty and authenticity.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is great, by the way. And anyone who's listening right now, something Kate said is really a powerful method. So she first talked about diagnosing, like getting really close to what it is you're scared of and finding out which of those three. Can you share those three areas again?
Oh, yes. Well, I looked at fear,
yes,
which is fear of the unknown,
yes,
fear of losing what you have, and fear of not getting what you want.
I love that. So I would write that down right now, and that's a great way of diagnosing which one it is, because it has to kind of fit into one of those
and
three.
It will be clear. I mean, that's the great thing. And sometimes it's two of the three, sometimes it's three of the three, sometimes it's one of the three. But once you understand what it is, you're right. You're able to then move forward.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, no, that's a great takeaway. See, this is what's amazing about this conversation. And when we were talking about it earlier, it's just, you go from being in your first ever movie at 14, right? What was your view of confidence then versus now? Because I'm like, at 14, no experience. I mean, that sounds like it takes a lot of confidence and courage. And then
or you get really good at sort of faking it.
Well, I want to know where confidence has evolved for you, because I mean, we're not going to judge your 14-year-old self about confidence, but
it's okay. So it's interesting. So I've always been very true to myself, and I haven't ever had a ton of friends. Like I really love one-on-one. I love digging deep with people.
Me too.
So it's like for like, if I look at the continuity throughout my life, I was more of an introvert in high school. I was very academic. I felt very shy. I don't know if I came off like that, but inside I felt very shy and self-conscious. Like I think most high schoolers feel self-conscious.
I think so.
Yeah, and yet I also felt like I was always very, very true to myself in terms of I wouldn't do anything that didn't feel right. I very, very rarely gave into peer pressure, because it was like I've always had this like inner core where I would just known like that is not going to be right for you,
right.
in a fundamental kind of way, and that's something that I've had throughout my life. So in terms of like feeling like I've known myself in a confident way, I think I feel like I was born that way in a certain way. Now, taking that away and looking at, being in my first movie at 14, that happened because I was a horse rider and I was a show jumper, and I absolutely love being around horses and riding horses. And, that gave me a lot of confidence. It was just something that felt like it was just inherent, I didn't really, it was obviously a skill I had to learn, but it was something that just was like an affinity for me.
Yeah.
And then the movie The Horse Whisperer was directed by Robert Redford, and he really wanted real horse girls to be involved in the movie. And so I just went on a whim to an open casting call in New York. I was living in Connecticut at the time. And the first time I'd ever even read lines, and sort of participated in a scene. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember just finishing that experience of auditioning with the casting director and thinking, oh my God, thank God that's over. And then I started getting called back. And I remember thinking to myself, like, they don't know that I don't know what I'm doing, And so I had this kind of weird imposter syndrome for a long time. I feel like sometimes I still have it, when I feel like when people say like, oh, I went to Juilliard, I'm thinking, oh God, they're the real deal. And they're going to find out really soon that I don't know what I'm doing. But I suppose, with time, you feel more comfortable, and with more experience, more comfortable.
How did
with
you
anything
deal with that
do.
then? Or did you deal with it? Because did you even have a name for it at that time? Or was it just this constant anxiety of like, I'm going to be found out?
Yeah.
When actually there's nothing to find out, because someone liked your work and they thought you were right and, and they put you on. But we all do that to ourselves.
Yeah, we do. And that's probably where a lot of this self-criticism started, where like literally cut to, 20 years later, when I just said, look, like I have to really connect to myself, like almost even before that 14-year-old girl, that's kind of how deep this last moment was. What's funny is that I felt more anxiety about kids making fun of me at school, because I came from a really small town, like I'm like the literally normal kid, suburbia, girl. And I remember thinking it like, in middle school, kids are going to make fun of me that I'm doing something weird,
Right. Wow.
And, it's middle school is funny because jealousy is so rampant there anyway, and so I was aware, I had like my antenna out that like kids are going to sort of start preying on the fact that I'm doing something interesting, and they have to like squash that immediately. You know what I mean? Like, no, that's way too cool.
Yeah.
And like, for example, I mean, I was very aware of wanting normal experiences. That was one of the things I was like, when I was saying I was very self-aware as a younger person. I remember there was a movie I really wanted to do. And I had to audition numerous times for it. And it was this small movie, but it was a great character. And they couldn't give me the dates off for my prom or for my graduation. And I turned it down because I thought to myself, and
wow,
I was 17 years old. And I thought to myself, am I going to regret not doing this movie as a memory? Or am I going to regret saying, I never went to prom, or like, actually, I didn't go to graduation. And it was the latter that I thought, I want that memory, actually. Like,
how do you feel about that now?
I feel good.
I love that. That's
I feel good. And it wasn't
awesome.
it wasn't like this movie version of prom. It was, a normal version, but it was something that, one day I'll be able to, God willing, tell my children, like, oh yeah, I remember when I did that. Yeah. And here's my photo when I went with my date, and it was just, I've always been aware of, while the industry that I work in is, it's magical and amazing in so many ways, it's make-believe too. And so for me, the idea of connectivity and love and groundedness has been really important to me. Like the moment that I start to sway from that, or I feel a bit unrooted from that, I really suffer.
Well, that's an incredible example of that, because I can imagine that that's quite a hard choice.
Yeah.
But you seem to have really found your values quite early. And that must give you so much confidence now, though. Because when I hear you do that, how old were you then?
I was like 17.
17, yeah. You're like 17, 18 years old. If you were able to do that then, that must give you so much more confidence and courage in your decision-making now. Because I feel like if you're being able to pull back then when like the temptations and maybe the magic felt more magical, whereas now you've had so much more experience, is it easier to tap into those values or?
That's like, it feels like an organ to me.
Right, yeah.
Like really, I mean, it's like if I start to sway from something that I feel, if there's a crossroads and it's like, well, you have this way or this way, if it's swaying from like the organ of my morals or my family or love or, the things that are the most important things for me.
Yes.
Then I'll always choose that. There was two other things in my life that were quite critical when it came to decision making. One was when I ended up graduating from high school. I ended up getting to Princeton, and my parents were incredibly proud. I think, if not the first, the second person in my family to get into an Ivy League school. And they were thrilled. Of course. But I knew at that moment that if I didn't follow my dreams and move out to Los Angeles and really try and give acting a go, that I might not do it. Yeah. And the toughest thing through high school really was this balancing act of finding a few bit parts here and there and also keeping up with academia. Because remember, back in the day, in the late 90s, kids, it wasn't like I could do my schoolwork online and people weren't as lenient. I mean, I had teachers that like flat out said, if she goes and does this movie, like I will fail her,
Wow.
So it was like an enormous amount of pressure to say, well, I want to have this experience. And then I had teachers who were amazing that said, you guys are crazy. This person's having an extraordinary experience. How dare you take that from her, And luckily I had a mom who went in there and said, we have to figure this out because I'm not going to, strip her of this experience, but I'm also going to continue her education. So we have to figure this out. So when I graduated high school, I was aware of the fact that it was going to be impossible for me to balance at Princeton somehow acting and also keeping up with that kind of academia. So when I was accepted, I went to orientation and sort of imagining my life there. And it's a beautiful campus, and I am sure an extraordinary experience. And I met some amazing people there. But it was, again, that thing, that inner core where I thought, I need to experience the other side. And so I ended up deferring and moving on to Los Angeles and going on like 6 auditions a day. I didn't know anyone. I used to go to coffee shops literally just to be around people because I was like 18 years old, so I couldn't go to bars or anything. And so I was so lonely so much of the time. That was the stage of my life that I really understood like the depths of loneliness, for sure.
Wow.
Because I didn't really know anyone. And I was chasing a dream, and I didn't know if it was going to happen. Yeah, talk about the unknown. I mean, it was like everywhere. I was living in the tornado of unknown. And yet I had a determination, that served me really well.
Yeah.
And I was, sort of seeing all these roles for girls, blonde girls that were sort of vapid and not very interesting. And I thought, this is kind of depressing. Like that this is like my, the version of me is sort of this like uninteresting, sort of bitchy or dumb stereotype.
Yeah, I grew up on movies like that.
Yeah,
I grew up on movies
it's
that were like that. Yeah.
So it was lonely and depressing until I read a screenplay called Blue Crush, and that was the moment where I thought, okay, I've never surfed in my life. I've never touched a surfboard. However, I know this girl better than anybody. Like I have an affinity to this person that is. I know what it feels to chase a dream. I know what it feels like to have an enormous amount of fear and doubt. I can do this. I can, and it took a lot to get that role.
And how quickly did you learn to surf?
Well, so, I mean, they obviously wanted to hire a real surf girl.
Yeah.
And so I auditioned for it numerous times. And while they thought I gave a great reading, they were like, look, we really need someone with the skill set, understandably. And so I asked them what their plan was, and they said they were going to audition real surf girls and try and get them to act. And so over the next 3 weeks. And so I literally went into the Yellow Pages, found a surf instructor in Malibu, and told him I have 3 weeks to learn how to surf. And so he said, you have to come here like 8 hours a day every day. And I did for 3 weeks.
That's insane.
Yeah. So when you asked me in the beginning, what part of your personality has served you well in that way?
There we go.
This is a great example of that. And I always tell people, my husband and I started a film school in Montana called Montana Institute for the Arts. And I always tell this story because the determination and dedication and discipline that it takes to find some kind of success in this industry, there is no magic wand. There is no secret sauce. There is no like, how do you make it? Tell me, give me the secret. But I truly believe that the determination and dedication and discipline will really take you a long way. And yes, talent. But those three things I think are critical.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And the reason why I love that is because it's almost like there's certain qualities like determination, dedication, discipline, desire that kind of take you outwards and upwards.
Yes.
And then I think there's a different set of skills that take you deeper and inwards.
Yes.
And it's almost like, you've got all these things that you just mentioned. Those are the ones that we know that success in any industry are going to take those things. But then happiness in any industry are going to take everything else you mentioned, like vulnerability and compassion, and non-judgment and not being critical of you, right?
I just got chills because I was like, that's the phase I'm in now. Yes. So I lived, I think, certainly through my teens and into my 20s with that kind of, I call it like be the best D student you can be.
Yeah.
And yet I was finding more and more distance from that sort of vulnerability and real kind of connectivity to your heart. And also, I was getting older and evolving and I think, it's so important to me to be connected to the heart and the soul that was really what triggered this kind of moment of saying, I'm letting it all go for a minute, because I just knew, I was like, I can't survive truly as a person in the world if I don't have that very, very firmly in place, and that it takes a lot of courage actually to kind of totally reset, your soul and your heart that way.
No. And that's why I started with that. I was like, it's that in my opinion, that takes the most courage. Like the discipline and dedication it takes to go outwards and upwards. The courage it takes to go inwards is not saying it's harder. It's just a different type of challenge.
It is.
And so you can't apply the same skills inwards. Like you can't go,
I tried.
Exactly.
I really tried. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it does, right? Tell me about that, because I don't think it worked.
No, I mean, I tried to, I was, I had found so much success in the urgency and the forcefulness in determination. I mean, my name, Catherine, means strong-willed and determined.
Yes. Yeah.
So I really do feel, and I'm a Capricorn, so I'm like a goat. You know, I'm like, just get it done. It doesn't matter how long it takes, you'll get it done. So I've always sort of applied that to my life. And so when I tried to say, you know, and I tried to sort of apply that inward, it was just like a bounce back. It was like, there's no entryway there, you know?
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Cause I think, I've been thinking about that a lot and I'll tell you about something else later that I'm preparing for, but that's so much of my thought process right now, that the skills that are required to go outward and the skills required to go inward are totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And we can and do and hopefully try, not everyone does, but most people try to develop the ones to go outward. Some people succeed insanely like you have. And then you're now going, okay, but now we need to do the other journey.
Yeah.
And just, I'm completely hearing you, and I'm just like, it takes so much courage, it takes so much effort. But how have you found it I'm always intrigued in relationships, like with your husband, like, has he been doing his own, or is he kind of already, and I don't know him, so this is not coming from any place of any insight. This is coming from a totally intriguing point of view, because I find like in couples and in relationships and in marriage or dating, whatever it may be, everyone's always evolving.
Yes.
So how have you found it? Have you both been evolving at the same time? Did he evolve first? Did you, how does that work? If you don't mind sharing.
No, I don't mind. Yeah. I feel like, he and I were kind of on a similar trajectory of this real, we didn't notice that it was somewhat unhealthy at the time, but I think because we work together and we're both so dedicated to our work and we love our work. I mean, it's an obsession, and it will always be. I love creating, and as does he. It's like DNA.
Yeah.
But I think it was me who recognized and kind of pulled the ripcord to say, we have to find balance. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like we have to find balance, and there's so much love there. That was not the question. It was, if everything is about work, and then if something's not working and it becomes about, well, I feel like I'm failing. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like very shameful. I feel like I'm not good enough for you. Are you good enough for me? I don't know. Am I good enough for you? Then all of a sudden you become into this whirlpool where all of a sudden you're just kind of a bit lost. And it was really this moment where I realized, no, actually, I can't look to him to fix me. And I can't fix you. And that was a big one for me, because it really kind of played in on that failure thing for me, where I thought, that's something that is interesting to observe, that it's actually not my responsibility to fix someone else. And it's not their responsibility to fix me. He's 12 years older than me. And when I met him at 28, he was not only someone I fell in love with, but he also became my mentor. He also became my best friend. And we have like such an amazing relationship that way. But as I started to evolve in myself and learn and grow, I started to realize that perhaps that leaning on him so much, and then him sort of probably pushing back a little bit of that, or feeling some kind of resentment, or, just things naturally that happen with that dynamic. Yeah. It was something that I had to really, really observe carefully and understand like why I was feeling so out of control with myself. And I thought, well, it's because you don't feel firmly planted. So the moment that you don't look to someone and say, help, but you look to yourself and say, okay, this is crazy. This is a wild free fall, but like you're going to survive it. Then you can look to the person across from you and say, okay, I've just kind of gone through something crazy. And I'm now seeing things very clearly. I think the thing in relationships that's interesting that happens over time is that you form patterns that are healthy, and then you form patterns that aren't, but it takes a lot of time. So if you're not careful and you don't have the communication up front, which is something that, I really have tapped into a lot in the vulnerability part of things, which is, if you're doing a movie for 3 months and you're like, oh, I really want to talk about this, but now is not the time. And then another movie comes along and it's another 4 months and you're like, oh, I really need to talk about that, but I can't really do it on Skype. It kind of ultimately creates something that can be challenging. Yeah. And then all of a sudden there's distance, and then, you're not quite sure what you're even talking about anymore, but you know that there's something that's not quite right. And so for me to kind of just take a minute with myself and really recognize what those things are that I was participating in that wasn't making me happy and wasn't making him happy. Literally, we became two people standing there saying, oh, okay, I see you now. I see you clearly. And that was also part of the courage.
Yes.
You know, the fear of losing what you have. You know, if we stand together in this new evolved place with each other, what does that mean?
Definitely.
You know? And I think that's something that I would really encourage people to talk about in relationships, especially now with, you know, social media and things where everything's all, you know, white picket fences and Labradors, to say like, it does take communication, and it's okay to have setbacks because that can indicate progress. But to be able to say, wow, I'm really feeling vulnerable and I don't need you to fix it, but I'm just going to communicate this. Sometimes it just starts with that.
Yes. Yeah. And let the ego go. When one of you says, hey, I think we need to work on this.
Yes.
For the other person to respond with no ego and say, oh, let me take a moment. Like, you might be right, but I'm not sure yet. Let me think. And then come back and say, yeah, actually, let's work on it together. Right. Because I think it takes that. So often when someone in your partner says something to you like, I think we really need to work on our communication or something like that, your ego goes, well, maybe you do, but I don't, right?
You instinctually go, well, I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Because it's just, you know, but I think it's so important that we just put our ego aside and go, yes, like, okay, you don't have to say yes straight away, but to really reflect on what someone's trying to tell you.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, you know, to understand that, you know, it's okay to not have an answer. Yes. It's okay. And this was part of our dynamic that was difficult, which is, you know, for someone 12 years older who probably felt like, and I don't want to speak for him, but probably felt like, well, I should probably always have the answer because when I met Kate at 28, I had all the answers and now all of a sudden I don't. Yeah. And for me to say, well, you know, I don't have the answers either, you know, it's super vulnerable, you know, to be able to say that to someone else. However, it really enriches and creates so much depth in a relationship and trust ultimately. Like, the three things that I've sort of, I know it's not like you can see like the sort of A-type come out with me, like when it comes to emotions, but the things that I've really thought about a lot in my relationship is this idea of, and I mean this with my relationship to myself and ultimately my relationship and my marriage, which is, you know, the idea of trusting yourself to be vulnerable enough, trusting the other person to be vulnerable with you. The idea of respect to do so, and accountability. And like those three things. Trust, respect, accountability, yeah. Yeah, those three things ultimately it's kind of like the tripod to strong love to me. Like where I say, for example, to use your example of, hey, I think we need to work on this. Like what's the accountability of that? Yes. Like rather than have a reaction, which I am so guilty of. You know, this is why I had to take my moment, you know, to say, well, that doesn't make me feel good because it makes me feel critiqued and sort of humiliated. And I don't like the way that came out. To sort of say, yeah, let me take a minute and say, well, what is my accountability in this moment? And like, what's the respect that I'm going to put forth? And what is the trust factor here with what that person's saying? And so it really, I mean, honestly, it is the journey inward that I'm looking at right now. Yeah. But it, you know, I'll tell you, it's really, it's created roots that I'm so excited for the next, you know, few chapters of my life. You know, I think I'll be, you know, to be more comfortable and embrace vulnerability, to be a better mom, to be a better partner, to be a better friend, to be better in my career. I mean, it's only going to enrich things. 100%. Yeah, no, 100%. And it's just, like you said, I think that's the best view to have of it. And that is the right view to have of it. It's like you recognize that actually the more work I do internally, it can only be a good thing. And it's just going to take me through roads and paths that I wouldn't love to be on. Right. But that's just part of it. That's part of it. And I think that's the same you would have had to do when you first moved to LA. Right. Like when you first moved to LA, you had to probably go to auditions you didn't want to go to, and you had to hand up at places that you didn't want to, and you had to do it for that reason. Right. And it's almost like on the inside, just because you can't physically see those places, but it's the same experience in that sense. Yeah. And it's, you know, I think when I had to assume so much armor as a young person moving to LA. I mean, I really did. I feel like I just immediately suited up and said, okay, I had to get so comfortable with rejection that it became divorced from me.
Yeah.
Like it no longer belonged to me because I had so much rejection that the way to survive it and to not give into it or go crazy or to like turn inside out.
How did you do that? Tell us about it, because I think that's such a big thing for people right now.
For sure.
And of course, I feel like in creative industries, especially acting, rejection is like the number. You experience rejection probably more than any other emotion.
Again, this goes back to just really having a strong sense of self. I realized early on that if I didn't put rejection in its place, like it doesn't belong to me. Truly. Like that rejection doesn't belong to me because there's so many factors that go into place with in my particular instance, getting a role. It's the look, it's the feel, it's the 300 people that are making the decision. There's so many factors that go along with it that that actually weirdly doesn't have much to do with me. And also, I've always been the type of person that really loves other people's success.
That's amazing.
I really have. I remember I remember very early on, like 14, 15, 16, when another actress got a role. And I recognized the pain because I wanted it so badly. It was like a heartbreak,
Yeah.
But I was genuinely so happy for someone else because I felt like that was meant for that person. And the moment that I think, well, that was meant for me, but I didn't get it and that person got it. Like I just knew at a young age that was going to become very insidious.
Wow. So you actually realized that really early on.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
I think I just didn't like the way it made me feel. It's like I've never been a jealous person.
Right.
In love or in that sense of career. I can recognize feelings of my own desire or my own yearning, but I don't like the way jealousy makes me feel. And I've never liked it,
Yeah.
That's
so beautiful.
Yeah. It's kind of like recognizing something in yourself that you're like, I don't like me feeling like that. And so I would rather remove that than not like myself in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. That's such a powerful point. And I love that because I think that's what it is with me. It's like, you just I don't like the way jealousy makes me behave.
Right.
I don't like what I say when I feel jealous. I don't like what I think when I feel jealous. And I don't like how it can be such a consuming feeling.
Totally.
Like it just kind of like, not embraces you. It suffocates you. And
I think jealousy jealousy almost is, can come off of that like fear, that fear title of, not getting what you want or losing what that those things play into jealousy, which is like really, if you look at fear carefully, it is the thing that can infect you in a way that's very negative. And I think jealousy comes off of that. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I agree. You were talking about some of the roles that you felt at the beginning were like shallow or not letting you play who you truly were and reflecting, like the like you mentioned, like, like someone who's just dumb and, silly. What roles do you think actually helped you explore deeper parts of yourself? Like, were there any roles that you played where you actually were like, oh, this is interesting, or you learned something about yourself?
Yeah.
Tell me about some of those.
There's a movie that I don't think a lot of people saw, but it was during a time in my life, in my early 20s, which you'd ask me, is this the first time that you had this like real kind of cracked open self-reflective moment? And it is definitely the deepest. But in my early 20s, I felt so overwhelmed by, the feelings of being judged or the sides to this career, like fame or perception, that I didn't get into it for those things. I mean, I kind of accidentally fell into it, as you know. So it was sort of so surprising. And I am a sensitive person that I didn't know how to kind of defend myself, like emotionally or spiritually, from all that coming at me. And so in my early 20s, I really feel like I had, I don't know if it would be like clinically described as a breakdown, but I feel like it was a breakdown of spirit in a way, in that I just felt like I didn't know how to exist really as a person and what I did, because I loved being creative, but I just couldn't really handle the other side of things. And so that moves into what you were asking me about, like red carpet or paparazzi or da-da-da. Like I had to figure out how to handle that in a way that, wasn't overwhelming and paralytic. But in answer to your question, at that moment of my life, there was a movie called The Girl in the Park. And it was a movie that was a two-hander between myself and Sigourney Weaver. And I think the best roles, and I think all actors will say this, is when a character comes into your life, a piece comes into your life, when it is kind of, it is connecting with you in a moment that is like lightning in a bottle, where it's like, it's almost like you have to have this kind of revelation with yourself while the character is also having it.
Yes.
And it's very rare because it's sort of like a shooting star. It's a moment.
The timing,
the timing is so specific, and it's so specific with the character and the director and the piece and da-da. But that was one of those moments that I really loved exploring that side. And it was cathartic to me in many ways because of what I was going to. And I was able to really connect to a certain pain with myself and express it through my art. And I loved Sigourney so much. And so it was kind of one of those moments where I felt like, I could speak to someone who had life experience and who is incredibly stable and smart and funny. And she's she's charmingly kind of little girl like sometimes, childlike in like the most beautiful way. I think my favorite creatives are like that, and they you just don't lose that spirit at all, regardless of where you are in life.
Childlikeness. Yeah, absolutely. And you've said somewhere that you consider yourself very like goofy and silly and funny and but people don't see that side of you. And I saw that straight when you walked in today. Yeah. You just like walked in like this beaming light, and then we were like laughing outside, and I was just like, oh wow, like you have this really playful energy about you. Yeah. How have you kept that? Like, what is it that? Like, I hope my wife's back today. I really want to introduce you to her. My wife is like extremely playful and silly. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, but I'll show you.
I'm going to.
She's just.
I love your relationship so much.
Oh yeah, it's very interesting. We can talk about that. But how do you keep that playfulness? Like you have that, even in your smile and just the being that you have when I'm around you. I'm like, where does that come from, and how do you keep that?
I think. It's not something I work at.
Okay.
To be totally honest.
Okay.
It's really, I think it comes out.
How do you protect it? Or do you don't?
I think there was a moment in my 20s where I tried to be like a cool version of myself. And I realized that I just felt like an imposter to myself. And I thought, well, you're just dorky. And I actually really love that about myself, and actually, that really is me. And like, it is something, it's a quality that, I find also disarms people in a way, because, I'm often in rooms where everyone's like very put to, and I love seeing people I know and, like embracing them and saying like, this is weird. You know what I mean? And just kind of calling it out,
breaks the ice,
and I really like that part of myself, that it's just who I am, it's the unarmored self.
Yes.
And so that makes me feel like my best self, really.
I love that.
Oh, thank you.
I love that about you. And I've only experienced it today, but I really love it. And I hope I get to see more of it too, because I'm super clumsy. Yeah. So I'm very clumsy. And I have a friend called Chase who always spots me doing clumsy things. And he always makes a list of them. Yeah. And so like we had this really serious, a couple of months ago, we had one of my spiritual teachers come and do an event at our home. And he's like giving like this really like peaceful, meaningful message. And I'm like leaning against the wall and I like switch all the lights off and on like like a light show while he's making like this really meaningful point. And everyone's like, he's looking at me and cracking up and just like, Jay, like, how can you not help yourself? Like find, and it's just like that. and I know there was a big part of my teens where I tried to, come across very smooth, especially to the opposite sex for me. And it was like, with girls I was dating, and I was always trying to prove to myself to be smooth. And that's when you get stuck in the feeling of like, oh, well, I get found out. Or then when you do something stupid, it's more embarrassing because you haven't shown that side of yourself. And now the other person's wondering, oh, well, this is who you really are. Whereas if you are just who you are, then people kind of laugh at it maybe the first time and then they start to love it.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I feel like, just being very honest with who you are, and there's like a cliche kind of like sound to that, but it is true. Like, the word authenticity is interesting because I feel like it's kind of one of those words that's so important and yet kind of weirdly overused.
Yeah.
But I mean it in the truest sense of the word, which is to really tap into that authentic part of yourself where you think this is really me. Like, this is me at the end of the day. This is me with my closest friends, or this is me in high school. Or I was like, what am I doing? I'm actually going to go back and speak to some kids at my high school soon.
Amazing.
And I'm so excited to do it because, I graduated with a class of 70, so tiny. And I feel like, they probably look to me now and think, oh, it's this, inaccessible and obtainable life and world she lives in. And yet I'm so excited to say to them, like, no, I'm like you. Yeah. You're like me. Like it's keep that. That's really important, and I think that, again, it goes back to the word vulnerability, I think. I feel like when I armor myself or I try and be a version of myself, and I choose when I do that at very particular moments. For example, a red carpet moment. Mm-hmm. I don't love them. I feel very odd standing on a rolled out red carpet. It's weird, When
you explain it like that, it sounds really weird.
It's strange. Yeah. I mean, it's super strange. And again, it's like
lots of people telling you to pose in different ways and look in different directions.
Yeah. And yet I thought to myself, you know what, Kate, if you're just like kind of falling apart and like not just assuming some kind of an alter ego for like 5 minutes, it's gonna look a little crazy. Yeah. So like you have to just pull the Oprah.
Yeah. There you go.
But she found her red carpet self. But yeah, it's finding those discerning moments of saying, look, okay, this is the moment where you suit up. A really, really good friend of mine. Do you know Dr. Nigma Talib?
I don't know.
You'd love her. Yeah. She said to me once, we were going to a red carpet event, and she said to me, we were in the car, and I said to her, oh, this is always like so weird, and I sort of expressed that sort of vulnerability to her, and she said, whenever I go into overwhelmingly energetic sort of experiences like this, I always just wrap myself in gold. Mm. I just imagine myself wrapping myself in gold. And I thought that's actually a really great way of thinking of it, because I always saw it as like suiting up armor, which is a little impenetrable and sort of off-putting. But to wrap yourself in gold is a much better visual.
Yeah, I love sort
of, that's doing the same thing somewhat.
Yeah. Whereas one you shine and the other one you're feeling like you have to.
You're closed off.
Yeah, you're closed off. Exactly.
And so then when I started to.
I love that.
So what? Yeah, me too. Yeah. And when I started to do that, and that was kind of in my sort of my late 20s. My 20s was I told you the version where I was like, I'm going to try a cool version of myself, and that kind of didn't work. It definitely didn't work. But when I started to wrap myself in gold, I realized that I laughed a lot more.
Yeah.
There's a lot more smiles rather than cool posing.
Yeah, sure.
And I preferred it. I would see photos here and there, and I'd be like, oh, see, you know what? That's a beaming, happy person rather than, this stoic kind of cool smoldering thing, which I get. Yeah. I get it. And you do go through those phases in life, but I feel best when when I'm not assuming that.
Yeah. And I think one thing you've said, and it reminds me of it, and I noticed it myself, I was reflecting while I was hearing you speak, that you were saying you're going back to speak to your high school and you're excited about it. And I was thinking, going back to do the things that make you feel at ease are actually where you find more of you. Like we were talking about earlier, of like when you're going on a late night show, or you're going, when you're going on something that's very like high pressure, time situated, you've got to talk about your TV show, your movie, as well as this, and there's all this stuff, and it's like 4 minutes. But then when you go to your high school, it's like they're going to let you probably talk for as long as you want, and there's just this freedom of expression. Yes. And you've just made me feel like it's giving yourself more opportunities to do that. it's one of the reasons why I love this.
Yes.
It's just giving yourself an opportunity to find and get lost and find yourself again. You keep that essence.
Yeah. And I think, I was thinking as you were talking and talking about, I just had this press tour for the island, and I'm so proud of the show, and I'm proud that, I produced it with the network. And I think you actually commented on this photo. So this is the kind of balance that I'm looking for. Oh gosh. Okay. This is the kind of balance that I'm looking for. And it was truly within this moment of, self-realization, which is, I'm committed to the work of promoting the show, and I'm really proud of the show. However, at the end of the night,
don't tell me what picture it is, because I think I picked it already. Okay. Is it this one?
Yes, it is.
Yes, I knew. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
And that was that was such a great example of it was a great example of self-care and letting go, honestly, of everything else that is the perception, right? Rather than showing up to something, the cool fashion crowd, which I love. It's fun. And I love fashion. My father was in fashion, so I really do love it. But for me to eat a bunch of room service with a beer on the floor was heaven,
It looked amazing.
Yeah.
That picture's so great.
Yeah.
And I loved it too. I was just like, and I love you sharing that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's, it's so easy. Obviously you're on a tour and you're promoting, and I know you did a bunch of other late night shows and all the rest of it. And it's fun to show that, but it's so great to show this. And yeah, I'm glad that you're doing that.
That's the good stuff. It's all good. It's all important.
It is all good. Yeah.
But it really, when it comes back to, what fortifies the spirit, what connects to the heart, if that inward motion isn't connected, then all the other stuff isn't going to be as strong anyway,
And without trying to give too much away, you play a very confrontational character in the island, right? Yeah.
She's so
like, it's like in your own life, you're kind of going in it, and then here, this one, you're like,
no,
I don't want to give too much away, but
yeah, it was a really great experience for me, because I don't often get the opportunity of playing a character, and this was, I'm so grateful to Netflix. They're so much fun to work with, and they're so collaborative, because I said to them, I was able to really form this character with them. And I said, I want to exercise the power of restraint with this character.
Wow.
Which means, with the show, you have a bunch of people waking up on a deserted island and their memories are wiped. And so the opportunity in that.
Love that concept. Yeah.
The opportunity in that for an actor is all the character is up front, but the plot is not there.
Yeah.
And that's a rare opportunity. Normally when you're watching a show or a movie, you're, understanding the character and processing the character as you're going along, because you're saying, oh yes, because that happened to them and that's their experience. And of course that's why they are who they are.
Yes.
So with this opportunity, you have these kind of weird reactions from this character, or a way that she says something that's really strange or off-putting. And you're wondering why.
Yeah.
And so I said to the network, I want you to take this leap with me, because I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue with her, with less said up front. She'll be a question mark that people really kind of lean in and say, what is going on with this person? So it was amazing that they allowed me to do that, because as you watch the season unfold, in episode 5 in particular, like her world just totally cracks open and you have the aha moment.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. I love that. And I love hearing you explain the creative process behind it.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense that you wouldn't see that. And I wanted to touch on Nona.
Yeah.
Because it was self-financed.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, it was
which
amazing.
Which is incredible. And it's all about human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And, when someone self-finances something, I'm like, wow, like this is deeper and even more meaningful than any work that you could do, I guess, because you believe that much in it. Tell me the story about what brought that together and why that was so powerful for you. It's been such an extraordinary experience.
My husband's really a brilliant guy, and he is so courageous with his work, and I am just amazed by him with what he does. He not only writes his screenplays, but he directs them, and now he's shooting a lot of his work. So he, on this movie, wrote the screenplay, directed it, and shot the movie as well. So it's pretty extraordinary. There's not a lot of people who can do that. Mm-hmm. And he came home from work one day, and he said, I just heard this story on NPR about a sex house that was busted not so far from our own home. And
wow. Okay.
yeah. And he said there's at the time, it was a few years ago, he said there's 44 known sex houses, in the Los Angeles area, which really means a lot more. And he said, I just feel kind of shocked and a little embarrassed that, like, I didn't know more about this, and that it's prevalent, in our backyard, but all over America. It's not someone else's problem. It is something that's happening here. And he, Mike's a real artist. He said, I want to use my voice and my art to shine a light on this issue and to bring it to the surface. And so, he kind of asked for my blessing to go off and write the screenplay, because it takes so much. I mean, I think writing is the most unsung hero of the artistic process, because it takes so much discipline and time and processing and thinking that's arduous, and yet you don't see it. You know what I mean? It's just so mental. And so he spent some time writing the screenplay, which is about a girl named Nona, who is from Honduras, from San Pedro Sula, and a young boy meets her there and says, you shouldn't be here. You should have a better life in America. I have an aunt. I'll bring you across the border, and you'll have a totally different life. You'll soar. And she takes the offer because her life is so poor and so lonely and so tragic where she is. Michael chose San Pedro Sula because it was known as the murder capital of the world. And so to understand the why and the how people take opportunities like this, it's because life is so much more dangerous and sad and difficult than the potential downfall of what could happen to them. It's like it's less risky to take that chance than to stay where they are. And for us, we thought if we can create more empathy and humanity, ironically, it's called human trafficking, and I think we're losing the humanity of the issue.
So true. Wow.
It's faceless. It's very highly statistical. And so we thought if we can put a face to it, though it's fictional, and he drew on a lot of his research to put into this character, but if we can create connectivity and empathy and humanity in this issue just through the story, then it's important. And so Michael was adamant about the Nona being an unknown, because he wanted to bring he wanted her to be faceless and nameless. It's the point of the movie. It's all in Spanish. Michael, he's half Mexican. His mom is from Mexico, so he has a whole side of him in that culture that he really treasures. And so he wanted the movie to be in Spanish. And he shot in the most dangerous parts of the world, which was San Pedro Sula, Guatemala, and all through Mexico. Wow. And so those three things were very difficult to get the right kind of financing. And so we had a financier, and it was about 6 days before everything was in place, tickets were bought, we had everything set. And I think it was about 6 days before he was meant to leave. They pulled out. And I remember we got the email, we were driving, and he's like, let's go get a drink. And we sat at a bar downtown, and we both got a whiskey, and we just sat there quietly. And I just looked at him and I said, I'll do it. I'll finance it, because for me to have the position of executive producer, financier, and be on the ground in LA and with a fellow producer, be looking at all the sort of logistics of how to do it, let him go and tell the story. And he was carrying a whole different type of torch. It was the way that we could find balance in making the movie. But it was really, we always sort of jokingly say it's like our first child.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was something we really felt was important. And, I work with an organization called CAST, which is the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. From this process, we realized early on that we need to have relationships with people who are really on the front line of this issue and understand it better and more deeply in terms of how we can help. And I've since learned that it's obviously not just an issue in which it's an international issue coming into the United States. There's the foster care system is really overrun by these predators looking for kids to human traffic. And it's a really hard thing to even say or hear, but it's important to know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much for using your platform and your production and all your skills to tell such powerful and meaningful stories, both of them, both the island and this, because I think they're going to spark thoughts in people's minds in different ways and different themes. And thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you.
It's awesome. So we end every episode with the final 5.
Okay.
Which are like a final 5 rapid fire, quick fire round, but they're never rapid or quick because I get too interested.
Yeah.
Everyone's very talented and does it, but then I'm like, okay, tell me a bit more. So you're allowed to do the same. So the first question is, if you could only, and I know you're a big reader, so that's what the question is based on.
Oh gosh.
If you could only read one book for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's so hard. That is such a hard question.
Or I can give you an easier version.
Okay.
I mean, I guess now that you're being vulnerable and, the question I would say is,
I can tell you the last book I read that I really loved.
Tell me that, and also tell me what's the book you've gifted the most. You can tell me
That's a good question too.
What's a book that you'd love people to read?
Well, interestingly, I really loved Still Alice. And the way I got that role was because I ended up tweeting, another great relationship through social media.
Oh, wow.
I ended up tweeting to Lisa Genova, who's the author of Still Alice. And I just said, I have to tell you how much of an impact this book made on me. Wow. And I truly recommend, I mean, even if you've seen the movie, really read the book, because I had grandparents who suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's, and it is a firsthand account of what it feels like to go through that experience as that person. And it made me a better granddaughter to not be afraid of how to handle that. Or it created so much empathy and understanding of what that might feel like. And so I tweeted out to her and said, I just have to tell you how much I love and admire, what you've done. And it's totally changed my relationship with my grandparents.
That's amazing.
And then we became friends, and I said, have you ever thought about making it into a movie? And she said, it's so weird. They're actually doing that right now, and you'd make a great Anna.
No.
And that's how that all came together.
That's amazing.
That's a book I'd highly recommend. The book I read recently that really I found quite astonishing was a book called 3 Women. Have you read it?
Oh, I haven't, no.
It's truly an astounding piece of work. It is nonfiction, but it is written in an incredibly narrative way. The author followed 3 women living different experiences in their lives, and really, it's very carnal. It's very revealing and explores desire and sexuality and insecurity and what it means to desire and what it means to be undesired and how that affects you. But it's so extraordinarily written. Like, that's a book I'm giving out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Though I will say, I'll give it a little asterisk that it is, it's
provocative.
Yeah, it's provocative.
Yeah.
But I like things that are provocative and really kind of can be shocking. I really love Murakami. He's an author that I've read almost every single one of his books. Gosh, and then I love, I've read The Little Prince more times than I can count, and that's the side of me that I cry every time the fox talks about taming the little boy and the rose and how she's more special than any other rose because she's her, so that's a book I give out quite a lot.
I love that.
And The Giving Tree.
Thank you.
That
so many great
The Giving Tree makes me cry.
Yeah.
So it really runs the gamut. I mean, that's a real run the gamut kind of.
That's cool. I love it. Great answer.
Okay.
It's beautiful. Not quick fire or rapid fire, as I said, but I love it. You spoke about this a little earlier before we started properly, but it was, I was going to ask you what your favorite self-care tip was. And you were talking about how, horse riding, like people meditate, you horse ride. So yeah, but what's your favorite self-care tip or thing that you do for your self-care and relaxation and refueling? Doesn't have to be horse riding.
I find reading, for me, reading is very important. I'm most connected to myself when I'm either reading great literature or I'm very excited about your book, by the way.
Thank you.
Really, I mean it, because it's the people who inspire me and give of themselves through writing that I find a lot of grounding in. So like, for example, I've been doing a lot of reading in the last month, and like underlining things and asterisking and, but also one of the things that I find quite honestly difficult, and I think it's probably my first step into meditation, is just being comfortable with quiet and being on your own. I find that quite confrontational, which is when I know it's good for me.
Yeah.
And I think for me, being physical is important. When I'm not finding regular activity or exercise, I find that I have a lot more anxiety. Whereas if I think that, like, honestly, one of the great pieces of advice I was given once was, if you're really in a moment where you're feeling an enormous amount of anxiety or fear, go for a walk.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Get moving.
Get moving.
I love that. Okay, awesome. Question number 3. What's one thing you're learning right now? Something you're trying to learn?
What's one of 5?
One of the 5. Yeah.
What's one thing I've learned right now?
Or learning in the process. Yeah, learning in the process of.
For me, it's really about being comfortable in the unknown. That's the big one for me.
Yeah.
And it's a daily practice.
Yeah, definitely.
To say, well, I just don't have the answer for that yet. And to understand that it's a process and it's okay. And there's actually a lot of there will be a lot of strength that comes out of that patience. It's funny. I when I sort of, when I pulled the ripcord on my life for a moment. My husband had said to me really early on in our relationship, honey, I love you, but you need to learn how to be a more patient gardener. And I literally said in my wedding vows, because we wrote our own vows, I vowed to try and be a more patient gardener. And interestingly, throughout this month, and I took a lot of time really not talking to anyone and just being on my own, including him, which is, for him, he was so brilliant, because he said, I was afraid to say I need to take some time alone.
Yeah.
I didn't know how he would take it. I didn't know, again, going back to the fear of losing what you have. And he had so generously said, you take all the time you need. So I had literally said in my vows, I promised to try and be a more patient gardener. And so when he had said, you take all the space you need, and I took, over a month of truly self-reflection and understanding the power of saying, I don't know, or I am comfortable / uncomfortable in the unknown, but that's what it is. When I wrote him a letter, actually, when I surfaced again, and one of the things I said was, I'm starting to learn to be a more patient gardener. And that was a big thing. And he understood. Like, that was where he said, okay, I understand now. That's the growth spurt she's going through. And it takes a lot, it's sort of like really coming out and sort of spreading things and evolving in a whole new way.
I was just saying, like, I think you articulate confusion well, which I think is very useful to a lot of people, because usually we articulate things well in hindsight, or we articulate how we feel right now pretty badly because we can't find the words. But I think you've really probably helped so many people through this interview put into words what they're thinking and feeling.
Oh, thank you. That means so much from you.
Yeah, I mean that. No, I mean that. Okay, we've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
Question number 4. What's one book you'd love to turn into a movie? It's funny that I didn't know that story before, but I kept that.
I know. Yeah, can you imagine if you just did like easy ones?
If I did like, what's your favorite color?
I don't know if I have the answer.
That's cool. It could be the 3 women. Maybe that would.
Yeah,
be
honestly, that was the one reason.
I mean, when you said that, I was like, wow, that would make an amazing movie.
It's the one that. Oh, there's a book as well called The Evidence of Things Unseen that is, the female character's name is Opal, and I really, really love that character, and I love that world because it's a history in America I really love. But that's a book I'd love to turn into a movie, and I love the title.
Yeah,
I think the idea of I talk about this a lot. Funny enough, the the importance of the evidence of things unseen. And it actually kind of ties into The Little Prince, because obviously one of the most famous quotes is, what is essential is invisible to the eye.
Yeah.
And I think that really is, like, again, going back to the core of what we were talking about that's important to me is love. That is the most important thing to me. So the things that speak to me really are that.
Yeah. Amazing. And question number 5, what's a message that's in your heart right now, a fun, a vibrant message that's inside you right now that you want people to take away from listening to this episode?
No fear, only love.
That was the only rapid fire answer. But it was great. Yeah. I love it.
Yep.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you so much.
You're amazing.
Oh my God.
I love this
Such an
conversation. This was just so awesome. And I want everyone to make sure you go check out The Island on Netflix. Check out Kate's Instagram profile, where she shares very open, honest, candid pictures and a bunch of other great stuff as well. But thank you so much for sharing so openly, so vulnerably, so authentically. And I'm not just throwing those words around because I think they all make sense. I'm saying them because I've been feeling the energy here. So whoever's not in the room right now, just know that I've been sitting here face to face, eye to eye with you, and I've been feeling everything you've been saying. So thank you for opening up. Thank you for trusting me, and thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you for the trust.
Yeah, and I hope,
so appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope this is the beginning of a new friendship and learning lots more about each other and growing together.
Because otherwise I'll be a stalker, and that's not very good. No, really, I mean,
I love that. No,
I'm a lifer.
Yeah,
I'm one
me
of those
too.
people that are a
yeah,
lifer.
I'm like that too. I find my people, and then I go deep with them, and that's what I look for in life. And
it's roots.
Yeah, it means a lot. But thank you so much.
Means a lot to me.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Thank you.
Oh my God,
Hope
thank
that was
you
okay.
Oh my God, it was so great.
Yeah.